Well, hello and welcome to Mindshift Mastery. My name is Rebecca King and I am one of the brain changers from Moonbeam Monday Training and Coaching. So I want to thank you for being here today, or if you're watching the recording, watching along with us. I'm really looking forward to sharing this hugely valuable information with you today. Okay, so this is me. So I go by Rebecca or Beck. Now, I am a coach. You can see me in my purple jacket, which I'm wearing today. My pink jacket. I am a coach and I help people eliminate chronic anxiety by teaching them how to retrain their brain using NLP and hypnotherapy. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a bit later. Now, I'm also a cyclist. So I wanted to include a little bit about me personally here. I cycle for fun. I cycle for fitness. And I love a challenge, a cycling challenge. And in fact, I'm heading off next week to New Zealand to take part in a cycling and trekking challenge and to raise money for a charity. So that's a big part of my life as well. It gives me a bit of balance. And of course, I am a dog mum. So that is my little family portrait there. They are my two dogs, Ruby and Winnie. And as it says on the screen there, thanks to them, my favorite color is dog hair. I cannot leave the house unless I am covered in dog hair. So that's a little bit about me. And of course, as I mentioned, I'm also in business with my mum, Yvonne. That's us there at the beach at Glenelg last year. And so we actually started this business together, Moonbeam Monday Training and Coaching. And our mission in this business is to spark a revolution in your thoughts, words, and actions. And we really want to empower you to find your purpose and enable you to live the life that you choose, free from the constraints of other people's expectations. Now, I'm not a big fan of cliches, to be honest, and that does, those words, we hear that a lot, true purpose and empower people, but that is essentially what it is about. It's empowering you to live the life that you want. Because as you'll see throughout this presentation, a lot of us are actually living a life that comes from other people's values and beliefs. So this is our tagline, really. When you change your mind, you change your life. And we use that because we are so aware that this is the case. When you actually learn how your mind works, you have the capability to change it, and that has massive impact on your whole life. Now, I spent more than 20 years working in the corporate and the professional world in a variety of industries and a variety of roles. And of course, when I was in it, I knew that there were problems, but I was often so close to it that I couldn't always see what the real problems were. And so now that I've left that corporate world, that professional world, so to speak, I am actually going back into it, but in a very, very different capacity. Because over those years, I've found that there's three big issues that just don't seem to go away. And they are that everyone is stressed. People are riddled with anxiety. Just about everybody you talk to today has or is living with some form of chronic anxiety. And this sense of overwhelm is killing our culture. And I'm here to tell you that the drivers of these problems, they usually have nothing to do with what we think is the problem. So from the workplace perspective, we often think that we know what the problem is. But of course, it actually has a lot more to do with what's going on outside the workplace or what has happened in the past. And even in your personal life, often we think we know what the problem is, but we actually need to dig down and find out what the root cause is. So they're usually personal pressures that people are really suppressing on a daily basis. So I'm going to share with you today the secrets of how your mind works, and I call them secrets simply because nobody teaches us this stuff. Okay, often our parents don't know about it, so we don't learn it from them. It's not taught in schools. And so that's why it really is a secret. And I'm going to help you understand why you're triggered by certain events. We all have these triggers. And I'm going to give you some valuable tools to begin retraining your brain. And this is really the introduction to how you can help yourself Or again, if you're here from a workplace perspective, how you can help your team ditch that stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. Like I said, either professionally or personally. And I want to begin by asking you to imagine something. So imagine this. If desire was all you needed to get whatever you wanted, just imagine that for a moment. From a professional perspective, if you're a leader in a team or a manager, and excuse me, no matter what you asked of your team, they did it on time, on budget, no complaints. They got their deadlines. Imagine what that would be like. Or even personally, if desire was all you needed to get whatever you wanted, if that $2 million home on the Esplanade with the European car sitting in the driveway and everybody's happy and healthy, if you simply desired that, imagine what that would be like. As we know, it's not always the case, okay? It would be cool, but it's not always the case because information gets lost in translation, messages are mixed, deadlines are missed, all of that kind of thing. So we know that we need more than desire. We need to understand how our mind actually works. And we also need to learn how to retrain it. And funnily enough, up until about 4 years ago, I didn't even know that was possible. I didn't even think it was true that you could do that. I had no idea. I mean, I knew that I could learn new things. Obviously, I've been learning my whole life. So I knew that I could learn something new, but it never occurred to me that I could retrain my brain and get me out of this absolutely horrible situation that I was in. And so today I want to introduce you to the 3 C's. And these are the things that you need to know about so that you can begin making this change as well, begin retraining your brain. And they are consciousness, also known as awareness, choice, knowing how to choose, and then change, the all-important part, change, having the tools to change. Now, I just want to tell you a little bit more about myself and how I got from where I was to where I am today. It's very relevant because everything that I'm going to talk to you about over the next hour are the tools that I used. Now, on paper, 4 years ago, life was great. You know, I had the house, I had the car. In fact, I had 2 cars. I've put a few photos up there so you can see I was living probably what looked like my best life. I bought myself a new Mazda. I loved classic cars. My dad had an MG when I was a teenager and I absolutely loved it. And so I decided when I was older, I wanted an MG. So that's me there with my MG. I took overseas trips. I had holidays. That's me in business class, drinking champagne on my way to Europe after my 40th birthday and cruising down the Rhine River, and then me and mum in Copenhagen. So from the outside, everything looked great. I had a great career as well. But what many people didn't realize is that I had lived with depression for more than 20 years. And toward the end of those 20 years as well, I developed a crippling anxiety disorder. And it started small. It started with a panic attack here and there, although I didn't know that's what it was at the time. And then I started a new job and the anxiety got worse. And I actually thought it was purely work-related. And, you know, that the mere thought of going to work sent me into a real downward spiral. There was days that I couldn't even get out of bed and have a shower, let alone get to work. And I thought that the environment, like the work environment, was the problem. And don't get me wrong, there were problems in the work environment, but they were simply a trigger. So, you know, I tried to change the environment. I changed jobs a couple of times, but it actually wasn't the work. As I said, that was just a trigger. It was everything that I'd experienced up to that point. So like everyone, I've had traumatic events in my life. I've lost loved ones to illness. I've had personal illness. I've been in an emotionally abusive relationship. I've had loss, you know, so I'm no different to anybody else. But it was all of these things that were contributing to the way that I was feeling. And it actually didn't just stop at work. It had a ripple effect into every area of my life. And I was completely overwhelmed, that word, overwhelm. I felt lost. My self-confidence and my self-worth was shattered, and I was at the end of my rope, as they say. And this is kind of the way that I describe it in a visual form. This was what it was like for me. I felt like I was trapped in this psychological cage, and I couldn't see a way out. And the thing is, I thought that I was different to everyone else. Right? I thought I was more broken than everyone else. I thought that the things that I had experienced in my life were, they affected me more, that I honestly thought I was unfixable. I'd been going to doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors all my life. I'd taken medication and nobody was able to give me any relief. They couldn't fix me, so to speak. And I just thought that I'd simply have to learn to live like this, that I'd have to learn to cope with it or to end it. That's how I saw my choice. But then, as luck would have it, I was introduced to a coach, but not just any coach. This was a master NLP practitioner. And I have to be perfectly honest with you, I was really skeptical. I was probably the most skeptical and cynical person that I knew back then. And, nobody else had been able to give me any relief from this. So I thought, how's this person going to be any different? In 20 years, nobody had been able to help me. So I really went along to this coach to satisfy my mum, because she's the one who introduced me to this coach. And excuse the expression, but holy crap, if this didn't just change my life completely in the most positive way. And I actually noticed that these changes were immediate. So I kept coaching with the coach, and I still work with this coach from time to time, along with other coaches. I truly believe that coaches need coaches. And some things did take longer to shift, but I noticed an immediate change in my mood. And eventually I realized that the depression and the anxiety were gone. And that's a big call. Something you've lived with for 20 years, it was gone. And they still are. And I am confident that they will never reappear. Now, I want to clarify something for you, because I do get asked this question. When I say that I no longer have depression, it doesn't mean that I don't have days where I feel a bit down, where I feel a bit blue. There are even days where I don't feel like getting out of bed, or I'll have a cry. But that's not depression. That's being a human. Okay, so we all have ups and downs. So I do still feel down from time to time, but it's not a depressive state, and it doesn't last very long. When I say that I don't have anxiety anymore, it doesn't mean that I don't feel anxious in situations that warrant it. There are situations where it's warranted to feel a little bit anxious. And of course, I still feel that, but I don't have chronic anxiety. I don't feel it every single day, 24 hours a day. So I wanted to make that distinction for you. And this is me now. So just some more pictures for me. It's hard to believe sometimes that I went from where I was to where I am now. And, I actually went on to study NLP myself to become a master practitioner. That's me on graduation day. It was via Zoom, so that's why it's on a screen. I studied and I read, the top left-hand corner there. That's me. I am in my Oodie. I don't normally work in my Oodie, but that was probably about 3 o'clock in the morning. I joined a 3-night, 8-hour webinar with Tony Robbins and Dean Graciosi, and Matthew McConaughey was on there as well talking to us. So that's me doing my learning. That's me presenting at a couple of our live events. And then, of course, that's me and my mum, Yvonne, in our business, working both as coaches now. So how did I do it? How did I go from what I was in that cage to all these photos that you see and the person you see in front of you now? Well, I found these tools that kind of set me free from that psychological cage that I was in. And I tell you what, I found my why. And I know we hear that a lot. I found my why, I found my purpose, but it's true. I found my reason for getting out of bed in the morning, for keeping on going. And here I am now, partnered with my mum, doing incredible life-changing work with individuals and organizations, and I'm helping them set themselves free from their own psychological cages. So you might ask, was it easy? Not always. Some things more easy than others, but no, it was hard. You know, did it get messy? Absolutely. You know, there have been tears, there have been tantrums. It has got messy over times. Was it worth it? Absolutely. 100% worth it. What is easy, however, is to have that thought pattern that I used to have, you know, that to think that you're different, to think that you're more damaged than anybody else, that you're more broken and that you can't be fixed, that you're more complicated. But I am here to tell you that that is not true. I used to think that, but now I know it's not true. The only thing that stops you from eliminating the stress, anxiety, overwhelm, whatever it is that's a problem for you, is you. Okay, it's the limitations that we place on ourselves. It's the belief systems that we have that we're not even aware of. It's these patterns that we repeat over and over again. And another word for a pattern is a habit. You know, we've all got habits, good or bad. We like to label them good or bad. Some of them work well for us. Some of them don't work so well for us. And these are the things that stop us. And so becoming aware of these is the first step to change. So we are going to talk a little bit about beliefs and values. And what you might be surprised to learn is that we form these at a very, very early age. And actually, this stat blew me away when I first discovered it. And that is that 70% of your identity is already formed by the age of 7. 70%. So from the ages of 0 to 7, that's when we're taking on the majority of these beliefs and these values. And they're from parents, caregivers, grandparents, teachers, everybody that is in our circle at that age. And you might ask, well, Beck, what has this got to do with, you know, eliminating stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, either personally or professionally? Well, if you remember from the beginning, I told you that the things we think are the problem rarely are the actual problem. Okay, so anxiety, for example, it's a symptom. It's the end result. And what we need to do is actually go and look for what is actually causing the anxiety. And this is why, because many of us are living our lives based on someone else's view of the world. And that is those values and those beliefs that we absorbed at a young age. And if we never question them, if we're not taught how, then how do we know whether we believe or value something different? And, you know, we spend a majority of our week at work, and you know, so the values and beliefs of others, we absorb those as we go as well, and we take them home with us. So work very much has an impact on our personal life and vice versa. And they sort of follow us around. And that's why it's so important to understand how the mind works. So I want to ask a question here. Now, this is a rhetorical question, I guess, and I'll talk you through it. But how do you find the motivation to do things? Because motivation comes up a lot with the people that I work with. They're like, I just can't find the motivation to make changes or to do something different. And so how do you actually find the motivation to do things? And the answer is you actually need to take action. So sitting around waiting for motivation, that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. It's by taking action, even a small step. That's how we gain momentum. When we achieve one thing, even if it's teeny tiny, that gives us the inspiration or the motivation to move on to the next thing and achieve that, and then the next thing. And so if you're watching this as a leader or a manager from an organization, I want you to understand that there are two sides to this. When you, as a leader, take action, you actually get rewarded by your team as people who take action. And excuse me, and they get rewarded by seeing everything progress. And then that spills into their personal lives. And vice versa, if you're here from a personal perspective, when you take action in your personal life, it spills over into the professional life. So as you'll appreciate, when you do the work and you make positive changes in your personal lives, it spills into every other area of your life. So it works both ways. And taking action is exactly what I did to get out of that psychological cage that I was in. And by doing so, I am actually a completely different person to who I was 4 years ago. I mean, obviously there's a lot of similarities, but I'm now happy. I used to be very good at showing that I was happy, but I genuinely wasn't happy underneath. I was really good at masking things. But now I'm genuinely happy. I'm energized. I have a very different energy around me. I'm a lot calmer. People actually like being around me because I am calm. I'm pretty sure I never used to give off that vibe because I was so anxious. But I surround myself with different people these days as well. I even speak differently. I'm a lot more aware of the impact that my language, the words that I use, have on myself, the way that I feel, the way that I think, and even others. And of course, the biggest change, which I've already mentioned, is that I no longer have depression and I no longer have anxiety, which for anybody who has experienced either of those conditions, that is huge. And how did I make this happen? Excuse me. I learned a secret. And here is the secret that I learned. I discovered that thoughts become things. So what we think has a huge impact because it becomes our reality. I learned how to retrain my brain of destructive thoughts. So, you know, the thoughts that I was having and constantly thinking about who I was and how I felt, they were extremely destructive. So I learned how to retrain my brain so that I no longer thought that way. And I actually mastered how to control my thoughts. And it's about this time that people start going, oh, control. This sounds a bit weird. Like, are we talking about mind control here? And I'm going to say yes, up front, yes, this is about controlling your mind. It's about you controlling your mind, not me, you controlling your mind. So that is a big part of what I did. And I was able to re-raise those old obsessive compulsive thought patterns that I had that kept me stuck in that cage. And when I learned all of this, as I said, I noticed an immediate difference. And, you know, like I said, I've encountered a lot of trauma in my life in varying degrees, like we all have. We've all had experiences. But I used to let it rule my life. And I say let it because it was my choice to let that rule my life. But when I learned how to do all of this and when I learned what I'm talking to you about today, I finally took charge of my mind and I retrained it. So up until then, I believed that my past equaled my future. You know, I thought, this is me, this is the way that I am because of what I've been through in my life, and that's the way it will be. And if we continue on that path and we let that, then that is exactly what will happen. But I now know that this doesn't have to be true. So how did I change this? I said it before, it's all about taking action. And that's what I did. I took action and I got unstuck. I figured out what I wanted from my life and I figured out how to get it. I literally rewired my brain. And all it took was a series of small changes, and I gained these from my coach. The coaching itself was the easy part. But it keeps creating these profound shifts that I continue to notice. You know, and as I said, no more depression, no more anxiety, no more days in bed. And I was so impressed with the results that I had myself that I decided that I needed to help other people who had been in the same situation as me. And that's what I do now. I'm a full-time master NLP practitioner coach, and I help individuals and organizations eliminate stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, chronic stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, and find purpose. So what is NLP? So here's the technical version of it, neuro-linguistic programming. It's using communication, perceptual, and behavioral techniques to change thoughts and actions by creating new neural pathways. It's a bit of a mouthful. The way that I like to explain NLP is I like to relate it to a computer, right? So we sit here and we've got our keyboard and our mouse. They're not even plugged in, they're all Wi-Fi. And we sit here and we type, and there's a program running in the background of the computer that means when I type something, it just comes up on the screen. It knows what to do. And I don't even know what's happening in the background, right? If I want a different result to what I'm currently getting, I have to employ a software developer to come in and get in the back end of the computer, write some code and reprogram the computer to do something different, to get a different result. That is a great analogy for your mind. It's about getting into the back end of your mind, the bit that you don't even realize is there, and reprogram it. And we can do that using our language, our communication techniques, and the processes that we use through NLP. And it really started as a model of how we communicate to ourselves and to others. And it works on the belief that the map is not the territory. So what that means is those internal representations that we make about an outside event, they're not necessarily the event ourselves. And you'll understand that a little bit more when I talk about the filters of the mind shortly. So there's a lot involved, but basically it's the agent for creating impactful and lasting change. And if we want to feel better, or if we want to feel different, then we need to change, or we need to reprogram the way that we think. And that's why NLP is so important, because it provides us that platform to change. And Psychology Today magazine actually summed this up really well by saying NLP is the most powerful vehicle for personal change in existence. That's a pretty powerful statement coming from a psychology magazine. And there are actually some pretty famous people that you'll know that use NLP techniques or have used them. There's 3 of them on the screen there. Oprah Winfrey, one of the most recognizable and powerful women in the world, people in the world really. Russell Brand, Robbie Williams, they all have used or continue to use NLP techniques to help them in their line of work. So I talked about these 3 C's at the beginning. So we're going to start with the first one. And the first C is consciousness. And another word for consciousness is awareness. So it's all about becoming aware so that you can take control. And this starts with understanding your unconscious mind. So I'm going to explain the unconscious mind to you a little bit. Think about your unconscious mind as a library, the library of your life. So the memory of every event that we experience, everything we experience in our life, it is stored in our unconscious mind. Now, you may not be able to recall every single memory consciously, but trust me, they're there. And so what happens is, starting from when we're born, something happens and that memory is recorded. Let's think about it as though your mind writes it down in a book and it pops it on the shelf in the library so that it stays there forever. And what happens is how we react at that particular time and the emotions that we felt at that particular time based on what happened in that event, we store those emotions in our unconscious mind and in our body. And then we encounter a similar situation down the track and our unconscious mind goes, hang on a second, we've been through this before. I know exactly how to respond. And so it's trying to do you a favor. It's like it takes the library book off the shelf and says, here you go. You don't even need to think about it. Just do this. Just act this way. Feel this way. And so that's essentially what it does. We've made a decision in the past. And when that thing happens again, We don't consciously think about it again. We just run that play, so to speak. So you've made this decision consciously, but that doesn't matter, because based on your past, your unconscious mind already has a plan. And the reason for that is because it is the majority of our mind. So approximately 95% of thought, emotion, and learning, they occur in the unconscious mind. And what that means is that it's happening without our awareness. I want to give you a visual example of this. So on the screen, you can see an iceberg. Now, we all know, probably most of us have never seen an iceberg, but we know that there's only a small portion on the surface of the water that we can see, and the majority of the iceberg is actually underneath the water. And so that little bit on the top, that represents our conscious mind. And the conscious mind is everything that you're currently aware of, be that thoughts, feelings, or memories. And then just below the surface is the subconscious. Now, we really only break these percentages up into conscious and unconscious, but there is that part just below the surface, the subconscious, and that's that part that's not currently in focal awareness. But the large majority of the iceberg underwater represents your unconscious mind, approximately 95% of your mind. So that's the processes in the mind that occur automatically, and they're not available to introspection. So they might include thought processes, memory, affect, and motivation. So all of those things going on underneath the surface. And so an example of some of those things are breathing. We do that unconsciously. Blinking. Scratching your head. Now, I just thought about that, of course, but, when we feel an itch and we scratch our head, usually that's an unconscious thing. We don't think about it. And even something like driving to work. How many times have you said to yourself, oh my goodness, I was on autopilot. I just drove to work and I don't even know how I got here. Did I run a red light? That's because you've created this pattern. You've done this so many times that you're on autopilot, or you're doing it unconsciously. And in fact, with kids, children aged 0 to 7, they're physically conscious, but they're not even conscious in their minds. They're actually ruled by their unconscious. So if you've got kids yourself, or you have a lot to do with kids, or you just simply know some of them, you know that imagination and real world are pretty much one and the same for kids. And that's because they're not even conscious. They're being ruled by their unconscious mind. Now, we might say, well, that's fair enough, they're kids, but we do the same thing. So what's our excuse as adults? And the thing is, we're all running off these neural programs that we installed as a child. So the things that happened to us, those decisions we made as a child, that's what it's like. We've installed that program, that software program. And so I want to demonstrate this to you now. So we're just going to do a quick activity. It's really easy. So I just want you to sit still for a moment and notice your breath. Close your eyes if you're comfortable to do so, or just lower your gaze. And just take a few slow breaths. And notice where you feel this. Do you feel it in your nose? In your chest? Perhaps in your belly? What does it feel like? Is the air hot? Is it warm? Is it cold? What sound does it make? And now open your eyes. Now, 30 seconds ago, you were unconsciously breathing. And as I asked you to sit still and notice your breath, you moved into your subconscious mind, that bit below the surface, and your breath started to come into focus. And then you were consciously breathing in and out slowly, noticing how it felt, the temperature, and what it sounded like. And this is what happens in all activities in our life. So it's like this. Imagine that your life is a bus. and you're actually sitting at the back of the bus. Somebody else is at the wheel, and I'm a visual person. I like to imagine it as the Joker from Batman, and he's sitting up the front driving the bus like I'm in control. You're sitting in the back going, oh my goodness, this is a bit crazy. I don't know what's happening. I don't know where we're going, because you're not even the driver of your own bus. You're not, until you're aware of what the problem really is or what's really happening. It's like you're sitting at the back of the bus. So you're not in control. And when you increase your consciousness, that first C, you put yourself in the driver's seat of the bus. You're in control of where you're driving, what you're doing, what you think, what you say, what you do. So how do we bring consciousness? And I've got 2 tools for you. The first one is to breathe. And we just did it a moment ago. I know it sounds really, really simple. And I'm not just talking about this unconscious breathing that we do day in, day out. I'm talking about intentionally breathing. Because what happens is most of us are very shallow breathers. We breathe up here in the chest. And what that actually does, it has a massive impact on our body. When we're breathing shallow all the time, it's engaging our sympathetic nervous system. And that is the part of our body that it's the fight or flight part of the nervous system. So that is how we feel all the time. If you feel edgy a lot of the time, you're constantly feeling anxious, nervous, all of these things, it's like you're either ready to fight or flight or flee or even freeze. That's the sympathetic nervous system. And so what happens when you begin breathing intentionally is you drop into the parasympathetic nervous system. So you engage a different part of the nervous system. And that is known as our rest and digest part of our nervous system. And so you give your body time to rest. It then knows that it's not in danger. Because when you're existing in the sympathetic nervous system, that's your body going, oh my goodness, there's danger around. I need to be aware. And so we need to drop into that parasympathetic nervous system and give us time to rest and relax. And so, as I said, I'm talking about intentional breathing, and it can be as simple as box breathing, which you've probably heard of. You don't need to sit down for half an hour at a time. It needn't take more than a couple of minutes, a few times a day to begin with. You can do it in your car, you can do it at your desk, before you even get out of bed. And when you introduce this consistently, you will notice a huge difference, actually quite quickly. So that is the first tool. The next one is about getting it out of your head. Now, this is my favorite tool for bringing awareness or consciousness to a situation. Now, call it journaling, call it diarising, call it whiteboarding. I don't really care what you call it. Simply get it out of your head. Now, in fact, if you study any hugely successful person or life coach, they're going to tell you that this is a non-negotiable exercise. And many organizations already recommend professional journaling. So whether it's professionally or personally, this is a hugely beneficial tool. You know, we've all got ideas and to-do lists and negative self-talk piling up in our brain, and it feels really, really heavy, doesn't it? You know, a lot of people that I talk to, they're like, I can't switch my mind off. My brain races. Perhaps you're relating to this. You know, I'm an overthinker. Is that what you say to yourself? Okay, so we've got this mental load, and it's really heavy to hold on to. And to get past overwhelm, we need to learn how to process what's going on in our mind and to let go of all of that garbage that keeps repeating. And there's a simple way to start, and that is to get it out of your head. Get a pen, get a piece of paper, and start writing it down. There is also the sciencey benefit to it, because when you write something down, it's like you're encoding it. So this is a biological process that we have. So writing down actually improves that encoding process. So there's science behind this. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So when you get your thoughts out of your head and on paper, guess what happens? You get instant relief. I guarantee you, you get these thoughts out of your head and you will feel relief. So if you want to ditch that anxiety or that overwhelm, whether it be at work or personally, you need to start getting it out of your head and writing it down. So we've talked about consciousness as our first point, and I want to share a success story of somebody who's done this. So it's a stock image. This is Tom. Now, until recently, Tom thought that his biggest problem was procrastination, and it was having a major effect on his life, both personally and professionally. But at work, he would get overwhelmed at the whole task. And instead of diving in, he'd find ways to avoid even starting the task. And this led him to missing deadlines, which, of course, as we all know, when we miss deadlines at work, causes trouble. And he had this terrible feeling of guilt about that. And ultimately, it was creating anxiety for him. And every morning he would wake up feeling anxious about going to work. So what did we do? We took a deep dive to find out what the root cause of this problem was. Okay, it wasn't that he had too much work to do. It wasn't that he was overloaded. It wasn't that he was lazy. It was because somewhere in the past, Tom had had several experiences that had affected him deeply, and he'd become really fearful. And because he didn't know what else to do, he held on to those emotions in his unconscious mind, which is something that we all do. And we used a technique called timeline therapy, and I helped Tom access these memories and allowed him to release the emotions that he'd been holding on to for more than 2 decades. And it's not about reliving that particular memory. We don't go deep into it. It's about being able to release it. And until we did this, Tom wasn't even aware, he wasn't even conscious that these experiences were still impacting him. And we also worked on some clear strategies for him to move forward. And of course, the result, it's up there on the screen. He had a huge shift. But what I love is that when he emailed me the day after this session that we did, he said, for the first time in as long as I can remember, I woke up without any anxiety about the workday ahead. That was an incredible shift. So what you can learn from this is that when you become conscious of what the actual problem is, you're able to address it properly. Okay, you jump back into that driver's seat of the bus. So that's tool number one, or step number one, and you've got 2 tools there, the breathing and the getting it out of your head. So then we move on to number 2, the second C, and that is choice. Now, to demonstrate choice, I want to just give you a very brief overview of the filters of the mind. And this is one of the biggest things that helped me overcome those years of depression and anxiety. And I still refer to it very, very regularly, be it with my clients or with myself. So we've got Homer Simpson in the middle there. And what's happening is that every time we experience something, we've got 2 million bits of information coming into our mind per second. That's a huge amount of information pouring into us through what we see, hear, think, feel, smell. And what happens is that our brain, it simply cannot handle that amount of information. Okay, it's too much. And so it tries to do us a favor. It filters the information. Now that is working for us, because if it didn't do this, we'd be in complete sensory overload all of the time. We wouldn't be able to cope. But it's also doing us a disservice, because it's kind of taking the decision away from us. It's making a decision on our behalf based on all of these filters that we have, all of the things that have happened to us in our past. So the languages that we speak, the attitude that we have, the memories that we've stored, what we believe, what we value the most. And so it runs this information, this is every time something happens, runs it all through these filters, and it makes a decision to either delete, distort, or generalize the information. So some of it we keep, some of it just deletes because it doesn't compute. Sometimes it distorts the information. That's why, you know, you and I can be in the same room and experience the same thing, but we both remember it differently. And once it runs through all of these filters, it creates this internal representation, so an internal picture, and that creates an emotional state for us. So that event might create an emotional state of sadness, for example. And that creates a physiology. So we might cry, or we might hunch over. And then that ultimately creates our behavior. So we're talking about how we react or how we respond. So that's what's happening every single time. And because this is happening unconsciously, we're not making a decision every single time. But the great news is you can, when you become conscious of this, you can make a choice to change them. You can actually do some reflective work and look at, well, what is my current filter? What is my current belief around this? And what results is that getting me? What result is that getting me? What result do I actually want? You know, if I don't want that result, what is the result that I want? And that is a crucial part of the puzzle, of course. If you don't want something, if you're moving away from something, you need to know what you do want, what you're moving toward. And then what is the action that you need to take to change that, to get that new result? You know, is it about changing a belief? Is it about upskilling? Is it about doing the deep dive work? And we've got this little template, and Yvonne has actually popped it in the chat box there for you to download. We've got this on our website, or you can scan the QR code now on the screen. But this is a very basic way that you can become conscious of what the filters in your mind are actually doing. And there's a deep explanation of what those filters are and what they relate to on that resource as well. So if you want to open that door for choices to make positive change in your life, both personally and professionally, this is a very, very simple tool that can help you start doing that. And I want to share with you another success story of somebody who has done that. So this is Ali. And Ali came to me when she was feeling really anxious and overwhelmed and very emotional as well. She felt like she was walking on eggshells with her family. And it was actually like that at work as well. She couldn't even participate in a friendly dinner table discussion or debate with her family because she would become what she classed as overly emotional, and it would impact her for days. She'd be in a mood for days. And she was actually at the point where she was going to look for a new job because this was happening at work as well. She'd blow up at the slightest thing and she'd get angry and she'd burst into tears, which is really not the kind of outcome you want at work, let alone with your family. So everything was bugging her, and she was really confused about why this was happening because in general, Ali's a really positive, happy person. So something wasn't adding up for her. So the solution was that I taught Ali about the filters of the mind and how they were impacting her reactions, what she said, what she did, and how she felt, and how essentially what she'd experienced in the past was driving her decisions. So she was so overwhelmed and stressed that her unconscious mind had taken over and was making decisions on her behalf. And knowing this, Ali had a choice, and that's why it's the second C. She had the choice. She could either do nothing and stay where she was, which wasn't working for her, or she could do the work. She could do the deep dive. She could clear all of this, or she could risk losing her relationship and her job and continuing to feel like this. And so kudos to Ali. She found the courage and she chose to do the work. And it was hard to begin with. There were tears, there were backward steps as well as forward steps, but she did it. And now Ali is a different person. And you can see this on the slide yourself. She says she's confident. She's got a sense of peace and calm, no longer anxious. And I love that last thing that she said. She said, I feel alive. So to reiterate, when you are conscious of the filters of your mind, the space to choose your response rather than react in that knee-jerk way, that becomes bigger, that space becomes bigger. And when you increase your consciousness, you realize the choices available to you, and you're actually able to step back and take appropriate action rather than just simply react or respond. So it's like you take control of the bus. So that's step number 2, recognizing that you have choices, and the tool there is the Filters of the Mind template, which the link is in the chat box if you'd like to download that. And so step number 3, the third C, this is change. So you might be starting to recognize some of the areas in your life, perhaps in the workplace, perhaps personally, where you can see the filters that are driving the bus, so to speak. Or perhaps you're thinking of a particular problem that you're having and beginning to evaluate the filters around this problem. And this is good. With the consciousness, you'll realize that you have choices. And it's only when we become aware of these choices that we're able to make change. Now, of course, you cannot change something if you don't know what it is that you want or need to change. And you also need to know what you want to change too. I think I said it earlier, that's a crucial part of the process. If you're moving away from something you don't want, you need to know what you're moving toward. And that can be quite daunting. We don't always know the answer to that. And there is some foundational work that we need to do to come to that realization. So the purpose of learning this today is to become conscious of what's happening in your mind. And if you're a little apprehensive about change, that's okay. In fact, that's good, because it's only when we are uncomfortable that we're motivated to take action. And I know that change can be uncomfortable. And usually when I ask people about change, they're like, oh, no, I don't really like change. And that's why I love this slide. This is the back of Lisa Bilio's head. It's not her quote, but it was on her Instagram page. And it says, bad news, you're growing and it's uncomfortable. Good news, it's uncomfortable, but you're growing. And see the impact your language and the way that you say things and think things they can just completely change the way you view something. So a lot of us know that change makes us uncomfortable, or we resist change, and it is natural to experience resistance to change because physiologically we are designed to avoid discomfort. It's how our brain has always worked, and even though we've evolved, it still happens. Our brain is trying to keep us safe and comfortable. And if we have the opportunity to change something but we don't have to, if it's not bad enough, if it's not hurting us enough, most of us will just keep things as they are, the status quo, because we're designed to stay comfortable, and it's why most of us fear change. And we're all fearful of something, whether we know it, whether we admit it, we're all fearful of something. But those who are courageous, like Ali, and are open to change, they're the ones who will benefit. So we can prepare to make change by investing in ourselves. And you're already doing that by taking the time to either be here today or to watch this webinar. You're investing in yourself. You're investing time in this. And there's lots of things that we invest in our lives. We invest in our house, real estate. We invest in professional development. We invest in superannuation even. And what happens when we invest in something? It grows, right? When we invest in something, it grows. Even Warren Buffett said the best investment you can make is in yourself. So if you want to make immediate positive change and you need to take action, then invest in yourself. Or if you're here in a workplace capacity, invest in your team. Stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, they cost organizations often millions of dollars. And then even from a personal point of view, what is stress, anxiety, and overwhelm costing you? Not necessarily financially. What's it costing you emotionally? What impact is it having on the people around you, on your loved ones? It might even cost you your job if it becomes a problem at work. So like I said in the last slide, change can be uncomfortable. So now it is actually time to get uncomfortable. You've got the consciousness, you're consciously aware of this now. You've seen your choice. Now you actually have to make the change. you have to follow through with the choice. You know, a lot of people make psychological choices and then they don't take action. So you can make as many choices as you want, but if you don't take action, then nothing will change. And I want to introduce you to someone who made this change. This is Monica. And when I first met Monica, she was really lacking direction. She didn't know what was important to her. And ultimately, she was unmotivated and unhappy. And as a result, she was highly anxious. She couldn't make decisions on her own. She needed buy-in and validation from other people for everything. And she was regularly reacting quite emotionally. And so we began working together, and soon after, like with Ali, we took a deep dive to uncover the root problems, the root cause of the problems. And they did run deep, and they had nothing to do with work, even though that's kind of originally why she came to me. But it was affecting every area in her life. And so, similar to Ali, we took a deep dive, and Monica made radical changes in every area of her life. So she closed her business down. She went back to the corporate world, which she really enjoyed. She made dramatic changes in her personal life. And as a result, she's a completely different person. And I've gotten to know some of her family and friends as well. And they have said, my goodness, she is a changed woman since she's been working with you, since she's done the work and she made changes. So what can you take from this? It is that change is necessary for all of us. You know, change is the only constant. And you may not need to make radical changes. You, like Monica did, you may simply want to make some tweaks in your life. Not everybody needs to make huge changes. But if you are feeling stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed on a regular basis, something is wrong. There's nothing wrong with you, but something is wrong. Something's not right. And work and personal life does not have to be like this. There is a solution. And if you've been doing the same thing for years and years and feeling the same way and getting the same results and you don't like it, it's time to change. It's time to do something else. It's about becoming conscious, understand your choices, and embrace change. And it won't always be easy, like it wasn't with me, but it will always be worth it. And so to look at why these tools that we've talked about are important, it's because our habits, our thoughts, and our beliefs, they're running like a default program, like that computer in the back of our unconscious mind at the moment. And so what we're doing is we're teaching, with this information, we're teaching people how to regain conscious control of their thoughts and their emotions. You know, as I said at the beginning, our mission is to revolutionize, I can never say that word, revolutionize the way that we think. Okay, revolutionize our thoughts. And everything that you've heard today is aimed at helping you take control of the bus, so to speak. So you might ask, what now? So today is all about helping either you personally or your team, if you're here from a workplace capacity, ditch that stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. And as such, I'd like to offer you a free, no obligation, 30-minute chat. So we may, if it's about your team, we can have a chat about your team and really unpack those filters to create a plan to help them. Or if it's for you individually, we'll do the same thing, but obviously we'll look at you personally. It's just an informal chat. There's no obligation, and it's really easy to book. And we'll come out the other end with a plan, with a strategy to help you move forward, to help you make that change. So you can either scan the QR code on the screen right now and jump in and make an appointment time, or Yvonne has put the link there in the chat box as well. That does bring us to the end of today's webinar. I want to thank you for being here. If you're watching the recording, thank you. Please get in touch if you have any questions, and I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. And bye for now.